This is the Aptitude Outdoors podcast, where we interview travelers, explorers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the best tips and stories from around the world. Life is hard, and we're out here doing larger-than-life things, whether it's pushing ourselves physically in the outdoors or mentally at work or in the podcast studio. Absolute Aid is here to help you focus, recover, and stay calm during your most intense moments. Absolute Aid, created by nature, made with science, for those who seek to do more. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. Thanks for tuning back in. Today, welcoming Jonathan, a.k.a. Redbeard Outdoors, bow hunter, elk hunter, fitness fanatic extraordinaire to the podcast. Jonathan, how are you doing today?
Doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. And, you know, I was talking to you a little bit before we got started. One of the things that drew me to what you do online is you're kind of taking a different take on fitness in the outdoors and, you know, a lot of motivational stuff to get people inspired to get in shape and do things outdoors that are challenging, which, you know, anybody who listens to this podcast knows I'm all about challenging stuff in the outdoors. So before we dig into the nitty gritty of all the things you do over at Redbeard Outdoors, how did you get into the outdoors in general? Because as we both know, it's not for everyone. It is not. I wish it was. I've tried to make it for everyone, but the fact is it's not going to be for everyone all the time. So what was your journey into the outdoorsman life like for you?
Yeah, so I started in North Carolina, which is where I'm from. And it's a little bit different out there. It's not as much public land as here in Utah. And I grew up in the Scouts. And I actually grew up in a scout group that the leaders were special forces. I was right outside of Fort Bragg, military base right there in North Carolina. And so we got the full, my favorite, and I'll always remember this merit badge, the wilderness survival. And like every leader does it slightly different. You just have to hit certain requirements. But our leaders basically said, whatever doesn't fit in your pockets and on your body, you can't take. So they were like, they just told us like a handful of hard candy, like a knife, a little hatchet or something like that. Just very, very minimal amount of stuff. And they legit just left us. I'm sure they knew where we were and like they, you know, but anyway, that was kind of my biggest introduction. I grew up camping, fishing, canoeing, kayaking, stuff like that. And then, but it's totally different than out here. So I ended up going on an LDS mission down to Mexico for 2 years. For those of you that don't know what LDS is, it's Mormon, is the more commonly known phrase. But I went down there, came back to Utah, and went to BYU, like the typical Mormon. And but I ended up, before I went to BYU, after my mission, I met a girl up here in Bountiful, which is just north of Salt Lake City. And we got married. I transferred to the University of Utah and stayed here. And I was on the verge of moving back to North Carolina. Probably within the next year, I was going to move back. And then a buddy of mine in the neighborhood actually introduced me to the mountains out here, which I'd always looked at them and said, there's a lot of land. I don't know anything about them. I'm not going to go do that. Right. Like we'll go camping every once in a while, but I'm not about tackling that by myself. My wife wasn't big into it. She likes trail running and stuff. But he took me on a couple hunts. And then we did backpacking, and I just fell in love. I loved the difficulty of it. I definitely wasn't the fastest fastest backpacker. I wasn't good at spotting animals at first, but it just grew on me, and the challenge. And I've always loved challenge. And so ever since then, I've been out here in Utah and just loving all the public land and the fact that you can drive 10 minutes and hit 15 different trailheads, you know, kid-friendly ones and more difficult ones. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's one of the things out here where I'm at in Ohio. We have some public land, but it's not on the scale like you guys have out where you're at. So that's really kind of interesting. So, you know, you came from the West Coast where there isn't a ton of public land. Like I said, the scale, there is public land, but it's not to the extent like out west where there's a lot more public land. So what is that like for you? Because I have no experience on public land other than I've scouted a few public land areas where I'm at around here, like the Maumee State Forest is one that's relatively close to me. There's a few more, and I plan on scouting them out this year for turkey, deer, and things like that. But what's like, how different is it on public land?
The hunting aspect of things or just anything?
Yeah.
So for hunting, honestly, I don't really have a lot of experience on private land hunting. So it can get crowded during the rifle season, especially. And I noticed that, and that's what drew me another kind of nudge in my ribs to go towards bow hunting. And I didn't like seeing what people call the Orange Army or the pumpkin patch or whatever you want to call it. Like it literally was every ridge. There were multiple orange vests and jackets. And so I didn't want it to get mixed up with that. And so, and then of course the challenge of archery, but I guess we'll probably get into that in the future here. But as far as public land, it's amazing to think that that's everyone's. And that's why that was a big thing that drew me to sharing it with other people as well, is we have this amazing resource that's free. I mean, we pay taxes, but it's free. Essentially, it's you go out and you can hike, you can walk anywhere. You don't have to be plugged into the internet. You can just walk and just enjoy, just soak up, just breathe. When there's not inversion here, fresh air. You can soak up the sun rays. You can get above the inversion if you go high enough and get even fresher air. You can see these animals things that I've never seen before. And I don't know how to put it into words, but basically, it's just this amazing resource that everyone has right here. You can literally see it from most people's doorsteps. And if it's not on this side of the valley, it's on the other side of the valley. Like there's mountains everywhere and public land everywhere that you can just go out and enjoy. And I love that you're not walking on someone else's land. It's yours.
Yeah, that's a great thing. And that's very unique to America, which is super cool. I don't think a lot of the non-hunting public and even some like out where you guys are at, where you have this extensive public land, I think a lot more people are savvy to it. But like for me, I don't think as many people are, but like a lot of private hunting out here, like everybody knows somebody really that has a farm or something, or a neighbor who will let them hunt there. So it's a lot different. So that's definitely a different like approach to hunting. And I've been invited to come out and like try it out west, and I'm just like, it's so much harder for me to get a tag, like coming from Ohio. Like I might have to wait years and years for any animal. What do you know by chance? Like what would be the easiest for someone coming from the Midwest out west somewhere? What would be like, especially Utah? Because that's like kind of like a hidden gem from what I understand in the hunting world. I might be ruining things for you, but what's a good animal that someone could come and not like have to save up for 5 years or something to be able to afford to come hunt out there?
Yeah. So the elk hunting out here isn't necessarily easy for over the counter, but from what I understand, it's the cheapest over the counter non-resident tag out here in Utah. And we ran into some guys from Missouri last year that have come here every single year for the last 5 years. I don't think they've been very successful. I didn't really ask. It sounded like a sore point, so I didn't talk to them about it, but they make the trek every year, and they were in elk with us this last year. And so they're here. I just think the elk are pretty educated. And we definitely don't have the elk numbers like Colorado, which is another one that you can get over the counter. It's going to have a lot of people, but the opportunities are definitely up there as well because they have the highest number of elk. So stay out of Utah and go to Colorado. No, but in all reality, I'd say Utah, I know it's the cheapest. And that one you can get over the counter. And so is Colorado. I know like Wyoming, Idaho is another one you can get over the counter. You have to play their game. It's a little bit more expensive. But I don't know. I don't know all the rules and regulations on that. I'm not versed on that, but I know those 3 states. So Idaho, Utah, and Colorado, they have over-the-counter options for elk.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I like hunting whitetail out here. I like fishing and doing a lot of stuff like that. So it's a whole different ballgame. We don't have elk. We don't have gigantic, massive deer and mule deer and that stuff. But I mean, part of the whole thing of what I always tell people is like, you got to work with what you got. I mean, we can't all fly around the country and go do all this cool stuff all the time. Working with what you have is super important. And that's one thing I really liked about your podcast is you're always kind of like bringing it, I don't want to say bringing it down. You're taking it to the level of the average person to like anybody can do this stuff. You have to work a little harder sometimes. You're not going to get always like the prime, meat eater style hunt, but you're gonna have to work for it, but it's so rewarding. So that's something that you hit on a lot too with your podcast before we dive into really like in the hunting thing. a lot of like motivational stuff for people who are trying to get into the outdoors. So what are some mindsets that you use to kind of keep you on track with not only staying in your archery routine, which you're pretty much on daily, but your fitness routine and stuff like that? What are some of the things that kind of push you through those ideas? Because those things are not easy to do. It's not easy to wake up every day and hit the gym and shoot an arrow and go hard.
No, I agree. Something that I put a lot of motivational stuff out there because I'm hoping it'll hit someone that needs it that day. I'm a firm believer that motivation is very temporary. Motivation will get you off the couch, but it won't keep you moving. And so that's why I put something out every day. I'm sure there's quotes that I've recycled on my Instagram anyway, but I put up a daily quote, and then every Sunday I put up a Sunday scripture. And because faith is a big part of my life as well. But getting motivated, you need to find your why. And I know that's kind of a buzz phrase, especially lately. But I love the book, Start With Why. And for me, I've always been into working out. I've always played sports ever since I was 5. But I haven't always been the fittest per se. My nutrition sucked pretty much. I've always been kind of the chubbier kid, except through high school. And then I hit kind of my heaviest point where my kids, especially my son, who has no filter, he would always come up and smack my stomach and be like, "Dad, you're fat. You're strong, but you're fat." And coming from my 4-year-old son, I'm like, dang it. Like, I can lie to myself in the mirror. I can ignore mirrors. Yep. I can not step on the scale. I can eat whatever I want, feel like crap because I'm being a strong man. And for a while, I convinced myself of that. I was like, I'm hitting the 1,000-pound club. And then I realized a lot more people were in it. I'm like, well, I'm not that cool. And so and then that kind of started a journey for me to where I realized like, I love the outdoors so much. Why not make it easier? These extra 50 pounds that I'm carrying around on me daily, why not give my knees and back a break except for elk season or deer season or whatever, whenever I can be a pack mule because now I'm dropping that weight. So all of that to say, you got to find your reasoning behind it because it's not easy. There's days when I get up and the only reason why I show up to the gym is to show up. And sometimes I just stretch or work on mobility, do a little bit of jump rope, a little tiny bit of cardio to get the blood flowing. But it's not always a good day for me. It's not. And that's one thing that you have to realize. It's what you do in the days that suck, the days that are not easy or fun, that's most important. The days where you're leaps and bounds, as far as fitness or whatever it is that your goals are, those are easy and those are amazing. But the days that you're waking up and you're like, man, it's kind of hard to get up today. You still got to show up. You got to show up because you're going to regret it the next day. And the next day that you don't show up again, And so for me, there's not really something per se other than me knowing that I'm going to regret it and I'm going to hate myself because I'm my worst critic. And if I don't show up, I'm going to regret it. And so that's what works for me.
I would agree. The consistency to me is more important. Even just like you said, showing up when you don't want to. I feel like that's so much more important for you to prove. Like, to me, it's all about proving over and over again that even though it's going to suck and still showing up, like being able to put yourself in that situation is going to benefit you tenfold when actually you're doing something like hunting. Like this year, or last year when I got my first bow deer kill, I was like, the first time I ever got a deer, trying to drag the deer out of the woods. I was not in as good a shape as I am now. It was terrible. I had to stop every 30 feet and take a huge break, walk. And this year I got it out of the woods before anybody showed up to help me because I've started taking my health seriously and fitness seriously. And it's those moments I think that keep me going because I remember that moment. I was like, if I want it to stay this easy when the time comes, I really need to put in an hour a day or whatever the fitness goal is. But even the people at the gym even around me, they're always just like, oh, I don't think I want to do this workout. It's too difficult. I was like, that's the one you need to do the most. That's the workout right there. So I'm a big fan of consistency, just showing up. Even if you set a standard like Monday through Friday, I'm going every day and I can take the weekend off, or Monday through or Sunday through Friday or whatever it is. Like, do you find that the more you do it, the harder it is to take days off, because then you're so committed. You're like, I feel guilty not doing this now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm the weirdo that, we went to, so my dad had some, eye surgery issues. And so he wasn't able to make it all the way out. He came from, Florida, and he was going to drive out here in his RV, and he made it through to Nebraska. And I guess the elevation was so bad, it was putting pressure on his eye. And so he had to stop, and we met him out in Nebraska. I've never been in Nebraska before. And there's not much out there, guys. Lots of corn.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, lots of corn. And so anyway, we ended up like an RV park. And I'm the weirdo that packs gym clothes when I go camping, like, or something to work out in. And so like I went, and I didn't have a gym, and that's frustrated me because I love lifting weights. But I went and ran, which I hate running. And like, I just like took that challenge on, and I just ran for as long as I could see corn and back, and so
you run 100 miles. Jeez.
Right. Exactly. But like, so that's just kind of, for me, like, it's hard to take that time off. And also, for me with kids, they know where I'm at. If they don't if I'm not home when they wake up, or if my wife's not home when they wake up, they know we're at the gym. Mm-hmm. They know that for a fact. And like, I tell them like, hey, I'm going to be strong for you and things like that. But for me, it's the fact that I want to outrun their kids in the mountains. When they have to have their 9 to 5 and I'm retired, I'm going to take the grandkids and I'm gonna be like, see ya. I'm chasing elk with your kids. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I want, overall, I want to experience the most out of life. And some people are like, well, you could die today. Yeah, you're right. I could, but I'm going to take everything that's in my control and control that, and not worry about everything else, and health is one of those things. You may not know that you have some freak issue that you don't know until you're dead. Right. But you do know what you can control. You can control what goes on in your hands to your mouth. You can control what you do when you wake up in the morning. If you're not a weightlifter, great. Go do Pilates. Do yoga, go for a run, go for a walk. Like, just do something that you can control for 45 minutes every day. Just get yourself moving.
And 45 minutes is nothing. That's like, most people look on their phone and scroll for 45, probably 10 times that amount. So it's like, I 100% agree with that. And I really hate that argument of, oh, but you could die today. Like, yeah, but if I die today, like, at least I like did hard things that were challenging, instead of just like lounging around and being like comfortable and having every convenience at my whim. Like, I like personally, like, I've built a mindset over the years. I'm talking like a 10-year time span, because I was like you. I was never in good shape. I was relatively strong because I'm like 6'1", 240. Like, that's just what I'm naturally a bigger guy. And so I lost a lot of weight, and then I started like taking my diet serious, which I think is a huge factor. And that's kind of something that I've seen, because with backpacking and stuff, that's kind of where I got my start, is backpacking. And the food that backpacking companies make and like outdoors food companies makes is literally almost like trash. Like, it is so bad for you. So like learning that
for that though.
Yeah. I'm just talking like the stuff you can buy at the store. Like if you go to a Bass Pro or a Cabela's or something, like these Mountain House meals and stuff, they have calories, but like, what's in them? Salt and fat, basically. Like, so, I think a lot of people that want to get in shape by using the outdoors, whether it's hiking, backpacking, running, they kind of forget about the whole diet side. And I don't think that's necessarily anybody's fault, because in like the US, like, we don't learn anything about diet ever. We learn the food pyramid and that's it. So like, what drivers do you use for people that maybe are wanting to try and get a better diet to be able to, like you or me, be able to perform better in the outdoors? Mm-hmm. What do you have any advice? Like, what do you do every day?
Yeah. So I'm a health coach on the side as well. And that's cool. Something that I do just based on my own experience. I've tested everything from keto to, I think the only ones I haven't tried are like carnivore, I think, and paleo. Other than that, I've done intermittent fasting, keto, all this other stuff. And it works for a while, but it becomes very complicated. It takes over your life. And for me, I couldn't enjoy my family because they'd be eating, and like during intermittent fasting, I couldn't eat with them. Some people that doesn't bother them. For me, I wanted to enjoy a meal with my family. And so The thing that I found that works the most is eating vegetables at every encounter that you can. I do a kind of a higher protein diet, and I'm not scared of carbs. Now, I am gluten free due to some issues that I found out a couple years ago. But there's amazing options, and it actually kind of helped me because I could stay away from breads and pastas a little bit easier, because it's like, breads, pastas, or cancer? Which one do I want? Like, and
yeah, exactly.
That's kind of where I headed. And as far as like backcountry meals, like I used to think, mountain houses, calories is what you need, right? Even though I was already fat, I had plenty of calories on my body that I could have used, and so I've actually found there's 3 companies that I use personally that their ingredients aren't garbage. And one of them being Heather's Choice. Everything on her menu is gluten-free, everything, even her spaghetti. I don't know how she does it, but so the Heather's Choice, Peak Refuel. And then for granola, if you're looking for some breakfast granola or anything like that, Alpen Fuel is amazing. Like some of their stuff, I'm like, man, I could eat this every day. It's like candy. Yeah. But it's clean. Right. And so I started focusing on that stuff but keeping it simple more than anything. The less ingredients, the better. Just things like that, but finding what you like. Like if you want pizza, great, but have one slice instead of the whole pizza like I used to, things like that, right? Don't make pizza an everyday thing. For us, it's family night Friday. We have pizza. I get one slice of my gluten-free pizza or whatever. And that's it, instead of sitting down and eating a whole large pizza and then feeling like crap for the next 2 days. Yeah. So that's basically it. That's a long-winded explanation of just saying, keep it simple. And if anyone out there needs help, feel free to message me. I'd love to help you.
Yeah. And it's funny how the basic tenets are always across the board, what are important for everyone. Like, eat more vegetables, don't eat a lot of fatty junk, don't buy candy bars and pop, and you'll be like pretty well off. I mean, there's no secret to it. It feels so mysterious to a lot of people because they're seeing all these like BS trend diets and stuff, like you said, keto and all this stuff. It works, but like the easiest diet you can have is like eat stuff that you know is healthy for you. And it doesn't have to be miserable, because I used to think the only way I could ever lose weight is eat rice and chicken every day. And like, that sucks. Nobody likes that. It's not fun, but like, there's ways to make food taste good, or just eating in moderation if you're not concerned with like fueling yourself like and functioning at like a super high physical level. There's plenty of ways to just lose weight. But anyway, enough health talk. People are probably getting bored already from my end of it with all this health talk. But hunting, let's talk hunting. So I've never had the experience of elk hunting. Definitely never had the experience of bow elk hunting, which I've seen plenty of documentaries and hunting shows and videos on elk hunting. Is it as dramatic and epically hard as it looks on TV?
Depends on what show you're watching.
You know what show I'm watching. Come on.
Yeah, if it's certain ones that just show you the kill shot and the celebration, it's not like that at all. Yeah. And then, a lot of people want to get wrapped up on like Instagram people, like, for example, Cam Hanes. I've got huge respect for him, and there's a lot of haters out there on his end. But, I've met the man personally. I've had a couple of conversations with him one-on-one. He's such a humble guy, and he's earned every bit of the wonderful ranches that he gets to hunt now. He gets invited to these ranches that are probably $30,000 a hunt up here in Utah, Deseret Ranch and places like that. Don't compare your hunt to that. Our hunt was, I can't remember how many days I was in the woods. I want to say it was just below 20 total. And the amount of days that I was in a bugle fest were 2. And in that bugle fest, we had a bunch of other hunters, which goes back to public land, that come running in behind us as we're just like, we're not even trying to close the gap at this point. We're just enjoying these 4 bulls just bugling off here in this bowl. And we're trying to make a plan. These hunters come running up behind us and just meow, meow, meow with their little fake hoochie mama thingies that they had going on. They would not shut up. And I just wanted to smack them, because I'm like, can you not just enjoy it? Like, why are we trying to worry about bringing them in? Just enjoy this. It's just beautiful. Amazing. But I realized that a lot of elk, and I don't know if this was my first official bow hunting year of elk. If they're generally this quiet in Utah, I've heard they are, but we had a couple of encounters that were super close. One time I got a shot off, and they were silent. And I don't know how these 600, 700, 800-pound animals can be quiet when I take one step and the whole forest lights on fire because, they can hear me from a mile away. Yeah, elk hunting is hard, but it's super rewarding. And I'm thinking of my example here was September 1. I went with a buddy of mine that I met at Elk Shape Camp, which anyone that wants to get into bow hunting elk, set aside in your budget this year, because usually there's a pre-sale at the end of the year to get signed up for 2023 Elk Shape Camp. I can't stress that enough. Your learning curve will get cut in half, if not more. It was so good that I went a second time this year. And I love the guys. The whole crew is amazing.
Yeah.
But basically, what happened that September 1 was I got into a good spot. We had split up. We agreed what time we were going to come back and everything. We had radios, Garmin communicators, because we didn't have cell phone service. And I got in this spot and, I was bugling. It'd been kind of a long day. And I'd sat there for about an hour, didn't hear anything but squirrels, which again, those things are so annoying. And, but they're like a couple of times they were almost worth an arrow. And I couldn't do it because the arrow cost a little too much for a
yeah, exactly.
But basically I was sitting there and then, I had my GoPro on my head and, I didn't hear anything. And I was looking off to my right. And then out of the corner of my eye, I see this big brown, just kind of movement through these trees. And I was like, oh, here we go. And you can hear it in the video. It's hilarious. My breathing, because I'd been sitting here again for over an hour. There's no reason for my heart rate to be up. Zero. Like I hadn't even taken a step. And you just hear my breathing just shoot through the roof. Just, and I'm sitting there trying to calm myself down. And this thing goes off. It's about 40 yards away. And I'd ranged a little bit and I'd seen my shooting lanes. And then he comes back over, silent as can be. If I didn't see him, I would have never known that he was there. It was a little spike, but he had antlers, so it was good enough for me.
Yeah.
And he comes over to it was about 23 yards, but he had a frontal shot. And at that point, I was at full draw, and he was just looking me dead in the eyes. And that experience, like, I can't even explain it. Yeah. Again, 0 to 100 so fast, right? And then he turns back around and side hills back to this other opening, and in all my adrenaline pumped fueled situation, I held that bow back for almost 2 minutes and I'm following him because I didn't want to let it down and spook him. And I'm following him and I thought I had ranged well. And so I had it marked at 30 yards where he was. And so, I went through a super clean shot. I went through my whole shot process. Didn't punch the trigger, which I'm surprised I didn't. I'd had enough time, I guess, to calm down at that point. And beautiful, clean release. And I heard a loud smack of the tree. And the elk runs off and he stopped, barked at me. And I looked just to make sure there wasn't any blood. But I was almost 100% sure I'd hit a tree. And so what had happened was I went back, met with my buddies. We came back and we were looking for blood just to make sure, and there was nothing. And so I had my buddy stand where the elk was, and I went back to where I was, and it was 45 or 46 yards. So I had put my 30 pin on the elk's vitals. And it may not seem like a lot for you guys out there that are rifle hunters, but 16 yards can make a huge difference in arrow flight. And not to mention that the bottom, basically the bottom third of the heart and that part of the vitals was covered up by this horizontal log. And so my pin gap isn't very big. Like it's pretty tight, but it was just enough that my 40 pin was on that log. And so that's what happened, is that I had misranged. And so after that, I set a rule for myself. If I don't have time to range it, I don't have time to shoot it. And anyway, long story short, didn't end up tagging out. I could have tagged out day one. I should have tagged out day one. But the things you learn out there, man, it's, anyway, that was just one story, but it's amazing. Elk hunting, I wouldn't compare it to anything else. It's, for me, that's what gets me going.
Well, that's the thing with hunting specifically. I feel like even fishing or anything outdoors is people that don't hunt or fish or do any sort of like hunting style outdoor recreation, they all think we just like to go out there and shoot stuff and just like have a good old time and drink beer. And every hunter that I've personally interviewed or talked to or, hunted with, it's all about the experience. And I think that's such an important thing that a lot of people are missing out on when they think about hunting. Because like, for example, I took my good friend fishing up in northern Michigan 3 weeks ago. We were ice fishing. We were just kind of like trying new stuff and trying to figure it out since I'm brand new to ice fishing. I've never tried before. So we go up to this lake we've had success at in the summertime. We're screwing around and we're pulling in bluegill and stuff. And he's having a blast. And he gets this pike, like a pretty decently sized pike on his line, and he loses it. And he's like having a meltdown. I was like, dude, this is your first time ice fishing and you just landed like a gigantic pike. Like, even though you didn't bring it in, like, that's cool. Nobody's doing that right now. Like, and those are the experiences. I had one on my rod, and half of his body came up through the hole, and he wiggled his head, and they have super sharp teeth, and he snapped my line because I'm just using this tiny little ice fishing rod with like 4-pound test line on it. He just shreds it. I was fishing for little bluegill, so I was like, whatever. And then instead of like trying to rip him out of the hole and like, I just looked at him like he just was there, and we looked at each other. I was like, this rules. And then he just slid back down the hole. I was like, I wasn't going to keep him. I knew he was too small. And just those moments, you're like, I didn't technically catch him, but it was like, I just got to see this cool fish. I had a great time. I'm out here in the outdoors. And I think that's important in and of itself. The time you spend out there, those 20 days, had to have been amazing in general, So like, I think that's something that a lot of people miss out. We get the same experience, I feel like, as hunters, but on steroids of the average recreationalist. Like, we're out there a lot doing not only the recreation, but the hunting. So we get to spend a ton of time outdoors. So what's your reasoning for hunting besides obviously filling the freezer?
So, there's obviously a lot of easier ways to get meat. But
yeah.
you don't have the story behind it. And that's something that like my kids have helped me clean turkeys. So like, I just go up the hill here and I'll get a turkey and I bring it back whole. I don't pluck it or anything up there. I just bring it back whole so they can help me clean it in the backyard. I took my boys to go get an antelope or a pronghorn, whichever you prefer to call it, up in Wyoming. And I knew it was a pretty easy hunt. I wasn't going for anything trophy size. And, right as sun came up, we were in the right spot. They were there like 300 yards off the road. It was a super easy hunt. And that's why I did that hunt is I wanted them to be there with me. And then I made them help me clean the animal when we got back. And so it's more about being in tune with where you're getting your meat from. And a lot of people lose that disconnect. It's kind of like with money. And I'm terrible with money. My wife is the saver. I'm the spender by far. There's no, like, we're on opposite ends of the scale.
You and me both, buddy.
And so both. Yeah. And so for her, like, it makes sense. Like she's kind of explained how debit cards and credit cards disconnect us from our money. It's not painful to swipe your card. It's also not painful to just go pick up a steak. It's not painful to go pick up meat out of the grocery store. You don't think about it. It's a lump of red stuff,
Yep.
Like it tastes good after you cook it, if you got the right cook. And so that's something that I feel like is super important to teach my kids, that they may not want to be hunters when they grow up, but they need to know where their meat comes from. And I love having that moment. For example, when I had a doe tag this year for mule deer. And there's a whole bunch of them, and mule deer are so dumb sometimes, and they'll look at you, and you can shoot and miss, and they'll trot 20 yards and they'll look back at you again. Like they're just, I don't know, but they can be some of the most majestic creatures at the same time. Mm-hmm. But anyway, this doe, like, she watched me as I drew back, and like we had this moment, and I can remember it, where she looked at me. She knew what was happening, and she didn't run off. And like, you could just tell, like, there was just that, okay, I'm going to take her life, and having to have that connection with it makes a difference for me. Having the respect when I walk up on an animal to say thank you. Like, I know the animal's not still there right? But thank you for providing the meat, for the experience, and then saying a little prayer there and giving thanks to God as well. Being connected with nature, and so for me, that's a big deal. For me, that's even bigger. Just the experience in and of itself. It's so much more than just punching a tag. Like this first year elk hunting, I'll never forget it. I had great experiences with my buddies. I ran into some dummies on the trail. I had a great time. I had some very ironic and just crazy experiences that I wouldn't have had if I was sitting on the couch watching a YouTube video about it. Those are cool to watch, but getting out and experiencing it, living it, watching the animals. And even when we're not hunting, I love just getting up there and watching and seeing what they do. Because again, there's no words to describe it. Nature is just, it's its own thing, and it's always changing. And I can't ever get enough of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And I'm right there with you. I think the death part doesn't get talked about enough. And I feel like a lot of hunting PR is spent not saying the word kill or death or this or that. You're literally killing something, and that weighs heavy on my conscience, at least every time I do it. Even I'm pretty wimpy, even in the fact, when I kill a fish, I kind of oh man, this sucks. This thing's staring right at me. But that's where food comes from. And you have to, I don't feel like it's up a choice that I need to make. It's a choice that is I have to do to appreciate it. Every time I eat deer almost every day, because I've made a commitment to myself. If I'm going to kill this animal, I'm going to eat this animal, whether I'm sick of it, whether I don't want it anymore. Too bad you killed this. And so that's an ethic that I really enjoy, and everybody's free to do whatever they want. That's on them. But for me, that at almost in a spiritual level, it's very important to have a respect. If you were to kill a cow, could you imagine? Those things are massive. That's a lot of meat. And people don't think of that death cycle, which is something which, especially you as a father of 5, I feel that's important for kids to know. I learned that at a young age. My dad, we had rabbits and we would eat them. And it was I just understood that food came from dead animals. It was just ingrained in me. And then you get older and you do it yourself, and it just becomes more ingrained in you. So people are so squeamish about that. And I'm sure you, just as well as I, get people oh, that's disgusting. And I'm but I know where that beef came from. How many people touch that? What nasty ground up, whatever. You have no idea how that can be. So great point there. Another thing that you're very adamant on is archery practice. And as someone who's gotten to archery hunting in the last 5 years, it's a whole new ball game, man. I've never had to be so patient in my life. It's such a finicky art form, and I'll call it an art form because it's tough. I feel any hunter could go out there and you could give them a quick briefing on a rifle, line up, dead zone, shoot, and you'll probably kill it. Bow is not that simple. So what draws you to archery? And especially you're shooting heavy poundage, considerably heavier than what I'm shooting. I'm probably at 65, 70. I'm usually shooting deer anywhere between 20 to 35, 40 yards out here in the Midwest. So how does that change the game for you? And what are your kind of archery regiments daily that you would go out?
So going back to, before I go into that, the whole idea of killing or taking the life of an animal, I feel as hunters, if you're the one that takes your bow out the week before season, or your rifle out the week before season, to verify if the scope's tightened down, or to verify if the rest is right, or to see if your broadheads are hitting. And if your reasoning behind shooting, and this is my opinion, this is all my opinion as far as this particular comment is concerned. If you're shooting expandables just because you can't tune your bow to get regular fixed heads to hit, you either need to stop shooting animals with your bow and just stick to target archery, or you need to delve into it a little bit more, get a good pro shop. Like, I don't have the tools here, but I make sure I set time aside to go up to people that do know what they're doing. If I don't know, and I make sure I do my part, again, what's in my control, I take control of that. And then what's out of my control, I know where to go to handle that. Right. So for me, it's our responsibility as hunters. If you're taking the life of an animal, you need to make it as ethical as possible. For going back to that doe story, like, I can just, like, it's like time slowed down for me. And I knew it was, again, a clean break, punch through both shoulders, out the other side. She was done in 10 seconds. Like, that was, and she was 40 yards off uphill. I made sure that I had practiced all year before I did that. Again, when I picked up my bow, it was like August. I could have still bought an over-the-counter elk tag that same year and taken my brand new bow out and done it. But I told myself, I'm going to dedicate a year to shooting before I go shoot an animal. And so that was just me, because I'm an animal lover, and people may think that that's crazy because I'm a hunter, but I had pets all growing up. I love animals. And so for me, that's why I do what I do with archery, is even though, like, whether it be in my backyard or in my buddy's barn, if it's bad weather outside and I'm just shooting inside, I think the most we can get is like 18 yards. And so at that point, it's not about necessarily hitting the X. It's more about my technique and my release. That's more important to me. Getting the reps in. The poundage, in my opinion, doesn't really matter. Like, I've got T-Rex arms. I'm 5'9.5", 5'10" on a good day. And I've got a 27.5-inch draw. So for me, I want to shoot a little bit heavier arrows. So I up the poundage because I can. If you injure yourself doing that, that's stupid. Don't do that. But like, I've been working out my whole life. So, once I got the technique of drawing properly down, I can shoot a heavier bow. But again, that goes back to the ethical kill. I know I'm going to be shooting out to 60, 70 yards. My top is 70 yards. My efficient range is 60 to 70 yards. And so I want to be able to do that ethically. And to do that, I had to up my poundage, which again goes back to what's in my control. I can work out, right? I can get my technique down so that I can pull back a heavier bow, so I can shoot a higher momentum arrow and do the good kill shot, right? And so that's why I shoot every single day. When I got that bow, there's a lot of stuff that went into it. And this first bow that I bought, the majority of it, my grandpa is, and I don't think I've ever shared this. I might get a little emotional. My papa, which is my step grandpa technically, but I always knew him as Papa, didn't ever see him any different. He was diagnosed with cancer a couple years ago, and he was told he was only going to have like 5 years to live. And so I'd been kind of talking about bow hunting and wanting to get into it. And I had a check show up in my mailbox one day, and they called me. I guess they had verified the mail or whatever. And they were like, "Hey, the mail show up." And I went and got it and, talked to them about it. And they said, "We want you to go get a bow." And I was like, "Okay, but why? Like, I can go do that, like, why?" And my papa said, "I want to see you. I don't want to die and give you the money. I want to see you using it. And while I'm still alive." And so I went and bought a bow, and I told myself as part of that I would practice every single day, even if it's just one arrow, unless I'm somewhere like the Dominican Republic or whatever on vacation and can't bring my bow.
Yeah.
Like, even when we go camping, I pack a target, I pack my bow. I shoot at least one arrow every single day. And if I'm home, I tell myself at least 10 minutes of practice. And that's sometimes with my gear on, sometimes kneeling, sometimes it's just at 10 yards, blind bailing. But I mix up my practice to make sure that I have that clean release. Again, controlling everything that I can control. I can't always control the weather, can't control the wind, can't control the sticks that are in front of me necessarily, but I can control my release, and I can control if my sight tape is right, if my arrow is right, if my bow is tuned. And so that's why I make sure I shoot every single day. And so I would recommend that to anyone that can. If you can't, at least every weekend, and hire a coach, or go use all the free resources and actually listen to what they're saying online. The good coaches that will get you to where you need to be. There's a lot of good resources out there. But for me, that's why I do it, because I owe it to the animal to be as clean. And there's no off season for me. There's the time that I don't have a tag in my pocket. Some people call that an off season. I just say that's my training time. That's time to get better. That's time to tinker with my arrows. You don't tinker with your arrows during the hunting season. You tinker with them the 9 months leading up to the hunting season, or the 12 months, however long whatever your training time is. But that's when you get to mess around with your stuff, not during hunting season, not brushing the dust off a week before you go out to hunt. For me, it's almost meditative. Because I have a shot process. And that's what I think a lot of people get burned out on shooting their bow. And this is something that I picked up from Dan at Elk Shape, but mainly his mentor, which is MFJJ, and Joel Turner from Shot IQ, which he has an online course. It's worth the money. Go take it. But basically my whole shot process is when I grab that bow and I nock the arrow, I check the dial, make sure that I'm at the right yardage, right? So I've had some people that have had bad experiences where kind of shot through my buddy's barn, his brother did, because we were out at 60 and then we went into 20 and he forgot to change his sight. So I went right over the target. So I look at my sight, check the yardage, and then I nock the arrow. And as I'm knocking the arrow, I say, okay, I'm going to take a controlled shot, period. And that gets me started. Then I put the lifeline there, and I don't grip with my fingers. That's something that I learned from Podium Archer or MFJJ, is I put it right there on the lifeline, and then I kind of squeeze these fingers like I'm holding something. Right. And you'll see those if you see me shooting in any videos or whatever. And then I draw back and I anchor. And I have a hand release, which it's right here on my desk because I like to fidget with it. Right. And so, I get back, and then my thumb's back here behind my head. I get back and anchor, and then I wrap my thumb around and actually touch my index finger here. So I'm not punching the trigger. And then I say, here I go. And then I say, pull until it goes off. And it's always a surprise release for me. And so that's how it should be. And sometimes you're not going to hit the X. That doesn't matter. And just going back to what is in your control, Joel Turner talks about that. He says, you're not in charge of aiming. Just like you're not in charge, like when you're driving, you're not looking at the yellow and the white line. Your body does that automatically. You're not in charge of aiming. You're in charge of your controlled release. Once you know that your sight tape is on, you've done the work, you're confident in your bow, which is again why you train in the off season. Then when you go to take that shot, all you have to worry about is your release, period. You don't have to really worry about anything. Oh man, is my sight loose? Is my arrow bad? Is this, that, all the stuff that can go through your head. You don't have to worry about that. You just have to worry about saying pull, or whatever the word is that you use. You're so dialed in, you can't even remember the noise that's going on around you. And then you get that clean break. It's the best feeling in the world. Right. So anyway, long-winded explanation there, but that's why I train with my bow every single day.
Well, it's important. And, you learn so much out in the field when you're actually hunting on things that you continually need to work on and build at. Like last year on the deer that I got with my bow, you practice static. We're practicing on static targets, and some shots deer are static, but the one I had this year, he was walking very slowly. And, I'm not like, I would never say I'm an amazing hunter. I've got 2 deer in my lifetime, but I only started when in my late 20s. So it was something that I had to kind of grow with. And, you get so wrapped up in the heat of the moment. Like you said, why is my heart rate at 115 right now? I'm sitting still. And so my heart rate gets jacked up, and I'm thinking, I have 4 days left at this plot I'm on. If I don't take this shot, it's all or nothing. So instead of doing a grunt or something to get him to stop, my brain's just shoot. So it's all the same thing. It all comes down to how much time and practice you put in over the course of the year. Like I'm not as proficient as you. I don't do daily. I might do a couple times a week. I might go shoot like 10 shots at 10, 20, 30, 40 yards and just call it a day. But like the shot ended up being perfect, like double lunged him. He made it like 15, 20 yards and just dropped over. It was beautiful. Like a textbook kill. Like I couldn't even believe that I did it. I was like, did I do that? Like, oh my God. But it all goes down to like back to that training. If you keep up on the skill, you're going to be ready for those moments. And that's two things I'll have to say. Like one of the things that made me realize is that I bought a ball target and I hung it on a tree in my backyard. And it's in Ohio, I live in the cornfields, man. It's just windy all the time. So it's swaying. And I've been shooting at that a couple of shots after I establish that I'm not just a terrible shot for the day. I'll get like one or two at 20 yards and make sure I'm good. And I have it all squared away in my yard. And I'll watch this target. I'll just kind of follow it and shoot and lead a little bit the best I can. But like you said, it all comes down to the training. And I've had my friends like, why don't you put hay bales behind it? Why don't you? Because I've lost a few arrows practicing on that thing. And I'm like, because if like, that's not how it is in the woods, man. Like it's all or nothing. And I want that experience. If I have to buy more arrows, then so be it. But like, I want to be not scared in those stressful situations. And to me, back to the fitness thing, specifically like high intensity trainings, like stuff that you and I are pretty similar with, like CrossFit style workouts. I feel like they prepare you very well for that headspace of that excitement of hunting, because say you go and do a 400 meter sprint and then you have to come back in and do like a, I don't know, 220 pound clean or something when you're winded and you can barely function. Like that translates for me so well to hunting, is like staying calm and getting back into like the mental zone where you need to be able to do the thing that is the next whatever movement you're doing in the workout. Is literally like shooting a bow and your heart rate's through the roof, and they translate so well. So do you feel that translates well, that exercise style specifically?
Yeah. So yes, I would say so, mainly because some of the workouts too, like, especially if you're elk hunting, deer hunting, I imagine I haven't quite gotten into high country mule deer hunting and things like that. But either way, where you're exerting a lot of energy. And sometimes you just have to put your head down and just say, this sucks, but keep going. Right. Yep. And that's, there's been a couple workouts here in the last couple of weeks that's kind of just how it felt, was like, I know there's an end to it. I'm getting there, but for right now, I just have to one rep after the other, one step at a time. And like I post right now, I'm going through 75 hard. I put one day at a time. Like some people are like, oh, I'm getting to day 50. I'm like, I don't even, honestly, I have to go check the app to see what day I'm on, because it's one of those things that like, and I'm kind of going to go off on a tangent here, but I don't know if you've ever seen Alone, the show Alone.
Where he cuts his arm off? Or no? Okay, never mind. There's a movie where he gets like stuck in a rock in Utah.
No. So Alone, I think it's called Alone, where they take a group of people and they drop them off like in the Arctic Circle.
Oh,
and
I've heard
they
about
have to
that.
survive.
Yeah.
And they have to survive for X amount of days. And they do this in different extreme environments. And the one season that I watched, I was told it was awesome because this guy, sorry if I ruined this, but you should have watched it by now. It's like 4 seasons ago. But this one season, there was this one guy, and you could tell it was hilarious. Like I'm not saying I'm a prophet or anything like that, but you just tell by these guys' mindsets who was going to win from the very first day. So there was one guy that was being super negative. He was being a brat, just talking crap about people. And he broke his ankle the second day. Mm-hmm. Karma, right? Whatever you want to call it. And then there was someone else that was like always talking about his family. There's nothing wrong with that. But if your mind is with your family and you're supposed to stay out there as long as you can, you're not going to stay very long. Like in that moment, your family, yes, you may be doing it for your family, but you got to dig a little bit deeper and be in the moment and take it again, one day at a time. And so this guy, and he had a very strong reason to be out there. They won a lot of money, but he ended up winning. But his mindset was, again, he said something to the effect of one day at a time. He was taking every single day for what it brought. He didn't talk about the future. He didn't talk about the past. He didn't talk about what he was going to win. I think he might have brought it up once, but like every single time that he was on, that's what he talked about. What do I need to do today to make a better shelter? To survive, to eat better, to this, that, and the other. Like he was very present in the moment. And that's what I think CrossFit style workouts, if you want to call it CrossFit or whatever, they do the same, very similar thing. They're 15, some of them are 15 minutes, but it's 15 minutes of suck.
15 minutes of feel like an hour and a half sometimes.
Exactly. I think, so we did a workout at Elk Shape Camp with WOD Prep, Ben from WOD Prep.
Oh yeah.
And like, dude, that workout killed me. And like, if you stand back and look at it, you're like, oh, it's not too bad. But it was only 14 minutes. And he even said that. He was like, it's only 14 minutes of work, guys. But like, me and my mindset, I knew this was going to suck just looking at it. But like, it was like push-ups, box steps, rower, like nothing too crazy. But you get into it and it's just awful, especially when you're pushing each other, like to go harder. And so I think that's how that translates. And also I like to, and I'm blessed again, I've got a buddy that has a barn that is a CrossFit style gym, but has a nice target in it, right? So I'll get my heart rate up super high. And during some of the workouts where there's a rest period of like 3 minutes or whatever, I'll pick up my bow. I don't give myself a rest per se. I'll shoot my bow for 2 of those 3 minutes, and it, to me, that's a huge benefit that I have that I can do. If you don't have that, find a range that you can go do some burpees on or push-ups, or go run 400 meters and then go pick up your bow and try and shoot out to 40 yards or whatever you think your effective range is. And you'll be corrected real quick. It's not your effective range. And people out east that hunt in, whether it be tree saddles or stands or whatever, a blind, you may not think, well, what does that have to do with me? I can walk out to it. It's less than a mile away from my truck. You're right. But how do you react when you're put under stress? And just kind of like what you're saying. And I bet if I was out east, like I'd be the guy that would have a tree in my backyard that I would put my saddle in and I'd shoot down, because those angles are ridiculous. It's like shooting here on the mountain, or even worse, more steep. And people don't realize that. If you're, again, going back to your bow being tuned, if you're not tuning that third axis, being super steep down or super steep up, you're going to think you're dead on and you're 4 feet to the left because of that. And so anyway, just going back to the whole CrossFit thing, I definitely think that that's a huge benefit. It can fit a lot of work in a short amount of time. And there's been scientific evidence to show that helps you get conditioned for the mountains kind of hunt as well. But more than anything, putting your body under stress and seeing how it reacts to it.
Well, I like that mindset, one day at a time also, because that's like for people like you and me, we're constantly doing output, whether it's physical output, mental output, social media output, putting out podcasts. I've continually filming like my next vlog, documentary, whatever the heck I'm working on, plus working a full-time job. Like, people continually ask me, how do you do so much output? And it's exactly that. One day at a time. You wake up, you get that stuff that needs to be done today done, and then you just do it again the next day. And it's such a good, like, there's no secret to it. There's no overwhelming magical switch where we're just like, yeah, I'm just better at everything than you. Like, no, I wake up at 6:30, 7 o'clock every day, and I work until noon. I eat something, and then I work until 4, and I go to the gym, and then I, do the podcast at night when I go to bed. Like, that's what it is. That's how I get so much done. And I think that's really important. Like, everybody wants this fast secret thing that they can do real quick and make it easier. It doesn't exist. Sorry to break the bad news to you. And like people talk about, I want quick fat loss. I'm like, well, think about how many years it took for you to put that on. How many years and how much money did that gut cost you? Yep. And that's kind of how I talk to myself. I'm like, how long did it take me to get this fat in my personal experience, And I did notice a huge difference between, so the first time I did 75 hard in 2020, I noticed a huge difference compared to now me doing it, because at that moment I was doing the whole, okay, I hit 45, only 30 more. 30 is a long time. A month is a long time if you're thinking about 30 days. My son will tell you that, he's like, when's spring coming? I'm like, oh, probably 2 weeks. 2 weeks is how many days? 14 days. Oh, that's so long, And so like that mindset will kill you. But like the last year when I did the whole Live Hard program, like I have to have that app so that I know what day I'm on, or I had to mark it on my mirror every morning.
because otherwise I would have forgotten, because I'm not counting how many days I've been in it. I'm just doing it, and that kind of thing just makes the difference. Like it's when you're in the mountains, are you counting how many miles you've gone? Because that sucks. If you think, oh man, I've gone 5 miles in, that means I got to walk 5 miles out. Yeah. Oh geez. Or like, stuff like that, like I've done how many lunges going up this mountain? Like if you think of it, you start counting it like that, rather than just saying, I can get up to the top of that mountain, and not giving yourself an out. Mm-hmm. It's just a different mindset. And that's, again, if you want a secret, that's the secret,
mindset,
just taking it one step at a time, one day at a time.
Yep. And I agree with that. And I don't want to keep you here all night. Obviously you got stuff to do. I got stuff to do, but strange coincidence. You're going to be down in Texas here in a few weeks, which is super exciting. And I randomly messaged you on Instagram like, hey, by the way, I also am going to be in Texas, and we're going to be doing this podcast collective thing, the Hunt Fish podcast thing I was talking about up on my wall. Well, no, wrong side behind me here. That's from last year. And so it sounds like you might be able to make it to the Hunt Fish podcast. So it'll be cool to meet in person. So I'm really excited. But what are you're bow hunting hog down there? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. So I'm going down to High Caliber Hunts with my buddy Colin. That's down in San Antonio. He's still got spots open. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but go check him out. It's just High Caliber Hunts on Instagram. He's got constant openings for hog hunts. I want to say some of the places have, I think they're called black bucks, the antelope. Yep. And then there's turkey coming up here soon. So if you want something like that, if you can make it down to Texas, get, again, reps in the red zone. It's a great place to go. It's not wildly expensive like some of these places can be. But yes, I'll be down there. And then after that, so are you going to bring your bow to the summit? Because I'm going.
You're going for sure. Yep. 100%. All right. Yep. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to bring my bow, because I'm bringing like every single piece of camera equipment I own.
Right. That's true.
But little secret, I'm going to be making a documentary down there, not specifically about the podcast convention, though that'll be a big part of it, but kind of just like me and my friend Seth, who's been on the podcast also, we've been kind of throwing around ideas. We're kind of like getting into we need to figure this out real quick stretch of the documentary making process, but I'm hoping, you and a lot of other people will be able to come and talk about hunting and why it's so important. I think that's a message. It's been, stated a lot by a lot of people, but I'm going to do my take on it with so many people from all over the country. I feel like I have a rare opportunity to get a lot of perspectives on this, and I'm very excited about it. I'm excited to meet you in person, but you're in for a treat, man. The last year, the Hunt Fish Podcast Summit was, I've been looking forward to it all year. So we'll just say that. Lots of good people down there. So it'll be cool to meet up in person. You'll have to force me to work out with you while you're down there.
Oh yeah, I'll be doing it, man.
All right, perfect. And before we wrap up here, why don't you let people know where they can find out more about Redbeard Outdoors, and kind of, I know you got like private Facebook group and stuff like that if people are interested in your kind of workout programming, health coaching, things of that nature. So
yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm mainly on Instagram. I post every day. I do the Reels thing. I don't like I used to laugh at people that did TikTok, and now I'm doing similar on Instagram, cause that's what they want. So I can get more eyes on me. But, anyway, it's red.beard.outdoors. And then, on Facebook, I do have a Facebook group. I don't like Facebook that much, but they have a nice private group community that you can create. So, over there, it's Redbeard's Fit Crew. You can go and join. It's a good little community of people all over the nation that just love to keep things simple. Like, it's nothing crazy. And then I've got a podcast as well, which you're going to have to be on. And that's just Redbeard Outdoors Podcast, on pretty much everywhere. I'm working on Pandora. Hopefully they get me on soon. And then I think that's about it for right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. Your podcast is a lot different than mine, as like I literally just put out my first solo episode last episode, and you've done a ton of solo episodes. But I just really like talking to people and interviewing, and like that's where I have my fun. But you have really good advice for people, expert, beginner. You have great guests on there. You've done a lot of stuff with Elk Shape, which they're huge on the internet. Like, everybody who's into hunting and bow hunting elk knows about Elk Shape. Mm-hmm. So that's awesome that you're involved in that community. I'm going to have to join your Fit Crew, because that's something I'm really passionate about, and maybe people can kick my butt up and down a little bit. And, thank you again for coming on. And yeah, I will see you here in, I think, 3 weeks.
Half
coming
weeks.
Up
Yeah.
it's coming up real fast, so
I know, right?
appreciate it, man.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.